Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere hot, dry, and strangely sweet. Not to the edge of a pool, not to a fruit stand, but straight into the ancient Persian desert where watermelons were buried like treasure. Lullabies were sung to fruit, and storage pits doubled as ghost stories your grandma would never finish telling. You're barefoot in the sand, and the stars are so bright it feels like they're close enough to snap off like grapes. Somewhere out there, someone's humming. Not for you, for a melon. That's right. Tonight's story is about watermelon preservation songs, those odd, half-forgotten tunes people sang while storing watermelons in the most inhospitable places on Earth. Places you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in without sunscreen, shade, and a gallon of coconut water. Except, of course, that sunscreen back then was made of crocodile dung and almond paste. You'd smell like regret and disappointment before you even got sunburned. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward into the cooling sand. Night has draped its deep navy over the Zagros Mountains, and the wind tugs softly at your sleeves. The stars have that diamond-cut shimmer only deserts can manage. Clear, defiant, ancient. Somewhere not far off, an owl issues a throaty complaint, as if judging your presence. You're alone, but not unwatched. At your feet, the sand gives way to something darker. Cracked mud plaster hardened into a dome barely visible from the surface. You crouch, tap it with your knuckles. Hollow. A whisper of cold sighs up from an unseen seam. Welcome to the Yakchal. Yakchal, in Persian, means ice pit. Built as far back as 400 BCE, these early refrigerators stored everything from ice blocks hauled down from the mountains to honey-laced melons sealed in clay. The dome was only the beginning. Below, deep beneath the sands, lay chambers so cool and clever you'd swear the architects were part magician. The entrance is low and narrow. You duck your head and ease in. Descending crude stone steps slick with fine sand and the breath of history. Each step feels like entering the lungs of the earth. Inside, the temperature drops fast. Not refrigerator cold, but desert cold. Bone dry. Still, your breath slows. Your sweat vanishes. This silence isn't empty. It's waiting. And then you smell it something vegetal. Sweet. Dry. The faintest whiff of old rind. There's a shelf carved into the earth wall, smooth with use. A half-buried ceramic jar sits atop it. You brush away the dust. Painted on the lid is a rudimentary watermelon green arcs etched in ash glaze, cracked from centuries of evaporation. You lift the lid. Inside is only cloth once damp, now stiff with time. No melon, just the memory of one. Historians still argue whether these pits were used primarily for storing ice or fruit. What's clear is that they worked. The dry air, thermal insulation, and shape kept perishables viable for months. It wasn't uncommon for a watermelon harvested in July to be served still juicy in November, long after the fields turned to dust. But this wasn't just engineering, it was ritual. Each step, from selecting the melon to wrapping it in wool, was layered with song, superstition, and scent. You settle into a carved niche in the wall, bones humming with chill. Above you, a shaft of moonlight filters in through a small hole in the dome's apex, painting a spotlight on the floor. You imagine an old woman kneeling there. She'd hum low and steady, rhythm matching her hands as she wrapped the fruit in layers of oiled linen. Ash, then clay. The song, some say, was as vital as the wrapping. Mainstream historians will tell you that song and rhythm were used to pace labor or pass oral instructions in pre-literate societies. Makes sense. But fringe folklorists, they believe these melodies were charm songs meant to lull the fruit into sleep, slow its spirit, and stall the rot. You close your eyes. The dome hums faintly. A breeze sneaks in from above, sending sand sighing across the stone floor. Your breathing syncs with it. And out. Out. It's hard not to romanticize the past when you're sitting in a melon crypt. There's a story told in the southern desert towns that in the heart of a perfect yakchal, you could store time itself. One villager claimed to have found his grandmother's laughter buried beside the fruit, Another swore he unwrapped a melon and heard the sound of a flute trapped in the rind. You think it's nonsense? But then again, that scent, that tiny puff of sweetness rising from the cracks, it does smell like a memory. You lean back, stone against your spine. And for a moment, the ancient Persian desert becomes smaller than your breath. The heat outside fades. The stars above swirl like soft ink in water. And all around you, silence folds in like a blanket wrapped in clay. You are now part of the story. You wake to the slow creak of wood and the hiss of sand slipping off the roof of the dome. Someone's opened the outer hatch. You're not supposed to be here. A thin beam of morning light pierces through the entrance above, slicing the darkness like a lazy sword. You freeze. Somewhere near the rim, a pair of sandals crunch over gravel. Then a whistle, a soft, tuneless thing floats down. The person doesn't come in. They're just checking. Maybe to see if the melon survived the night. Maybe to see if someone like you snuck in and tried to lick the walls. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. When the footsteps fade, you slowly climb back up into the light, brushing a century's worth of dust off your knees. The desert greets you like an oven door cracked open. But a few hundred paces to the west, there it is, half sunken in the sand. A second Yakchal, smaller and lower. You head toward it, squinting against the sun. This one's open. A boy no older than 10 kneels beside a pit, humming with a rhythm too steady to be improvised. His hands move with practiced ease, scraping away sand, revealing the curved belly of a half-buried clay jar. You crouch a few feet away, silent. He knows you're watching, doesn't care. Is it cold down there? You finally ask. He shrugs without looking up. Sometimes, then, with a grunt, he wedges a flat stone under the jar's lid and pops it loose. Inside, straw, dried rose petals, a blanket of sheep wool, and at the very center, tucked like a baby, a whole watermelon. The boy doesn't gasp or celebrate, just tilts it out into his lap and starts brushing it off. Like it's a thing you do every Tuesday. It's streaked with white ash and the faintest kiss of mold, but otherwise whole. Heavy, you can hear it thump when he shifts it. Still good. You ask. He finally glances up. Still dreaming. Still dreaming. That's what they say here when a melon survives long enough to be eaten in winter. You let the phrase roll around your tongue. Still dreaming. A sleeping fruit. A sleepy desert. All of it sounds like a lullaby wrapped in sand. Mainstream history barely scratches the surface of these traditions. Official records mention melon pits only in passing as methods of preservation, like pickling or drying. But local lore fills in the rest. Whole villages revolved around burying fruit. There were pit maps, annual dig-up days, and melon mothers who oversaw the rituals like priests. The boy cradles the melon in both arms and stands. It looks absurdly large against his frame. You want to come to the weighing. You follow him over a rise and into a courtyard shaded by palm mats and a tired fig tree. A battered bronze scale sits on a stone slab. A few elders sip tea nearby, eyeing the melon like judges at a livestock fair. The boy sets it down with care. Someone rings a bell made from a bent spoon and a goat bone. This, apparently, is serious business. One of the elders leans forward, sniffs the melon, taps it, listens. Another runs his thumb along the stem and mutters something in Farsi. The scale is adjusted. The weight is called. It passes. There's a small cheer. A clay cup of pomegranate juice is passed around. A song begins not sung. Exactly. More half-mumbled in rhythm. You recognize the melody. It's the same one the boy was humming while digging. You sit in the shade, letting the rhythm wash over you like a breeze. The melody loops. Simple, soothing, sticky in the best way. It doesn't rise or fall. It just hums forward, like a cart pushed by time. Historians still argue whether these songs had actual preservation effects. Some believe the vibrations helped align the watermelon's internal structures. Yes, seriously. While others chalk it up to psychological reinforcement and communal cohesion. Whatever the truth, these people believed it. And belief, in the desert, is more durable than logic. As the song winds down, a woman brings out a tiny dish of dried melon seeds. You pop one into your mouth. Salty, nutty, weirdly good. A little girl beside you points at the seed dish and says, "That's last year's song." You blink. "Excuse me. They sang to that one too." It remembers. You glance at the dish. It's just seeds. But now, you can't stop imagining each one with a whisper coiled inside, waiting to bloom if you sing the right notes. Behind you, the boy is already burying another melon for next season. Somewhere out there, in the archives of fringe scholarship, a German anthropologist once theorized that memory could be transmitted through stored food flavor, acting as mnemonic residue. He was mostly laughed out of the university, but he wasn't wrong about one thing. Food remembers what we sing to it. You lean back, let the pomegranate aftertaste sit under your tongue. Let the sun bleach your eyelashes. Let the wind sing a note you almost remember from a place you've never been. And in the corner of your eye, you catch the boy again kneeling over a pit, brushing away sand, humming his way towards preservation. You're not exactly sure how long you've been walking, but your ankles are full of sand and your mouth tastes like fig dust. The boy with the melon has long since vanished behind some dune, taking his song and his seeds with him. Now it's just you, your shadow, and a sliver of shade that looks increasingly suspicious the closer you get. Turns out, it's real, and it smells like smoke. The smell leads you to a low adobe hut with half its roof missing and the other half patched with goat hide. A clay chimney pokes out the top, coughing politely every few minutes. Outside, a woman in layered robes sits cross-legged beside a low fire pit, slowly stirring a pot of something that looks like jam and regret. You wave awkwardly. She doesn't wave back, just gestures toward a chunk of shade near her feet. You sit. In front of her, half buried in a pile of ash and sand, is a small clay oven. Beside it, stacked like cannonballs, are 6 or 7 watermelons, each one scarred, uneven, and somehow nobler for it. She lifts one with both hands, rolls it toward the fire, and places it inside the clay chamber. You open your mouth to say something stupid like, "You know that's a melon, right?" But wisely decide against it. Instead, you ask, "Isn't it going to explode?" She chuckles just once, like the idea amused her cells more than her brain. Only if you're impatient. Apparently, this is the part of the world where watermelons are sometimes cooked before they're stored. Mainstream historians barely mention this method. It's obscure even in Persian culinary records. But fringe food archivists, especially the ones who enjoy collecting things like 200-year-old pickled radish recipes, have described the process. Lightly roast the melon over low fire until the rind darkens, but the fruit doesn't split. Let it cool. Wrap it in salted cloth. Bury. Wait, it sounds absurd, but so does singing to fruit. The woman lifts the roasted melon out with padded tongs. Its rind is now darker, gently blistered, like a well-worn boot. The scent is smoky sweet, unexpectedly good. She sets it on a bed of straw, then hands you a knife. "Cut," she says. You obey, pressing the tip gently into the still warm skin. There's resistance at first, then a soft give. The blade slides through like it's slicing memory foam, soaked in perfume. Inside, the fruit is the color of dusk, darker than normal, almost winey. You take a bite. It's strange, warm, smoky, sweet, with a whisper of something caramelized. Not juicy in the typical way, more like syrup disguised as fruit. You blink. Why roast it? She shrugs, wakes it up. There's a long silence between you. The only sound is the fire, crackling like it's telling secrets it knows you won't understand. Eventually, she speaks again. Some melons dream too deep. If you bury them without heat, they forget their name. You smile politely, and roasting reminds them. She nods, dead serious, gives them spine. You glance down at the half melon you're still holding. It does taste a little braver. Around the fire, a circle of glass jars glint in the sun. Inside are strips of melon rind, some preserved in honey, others in vinegar, others with what appears to be chili oil. You raise an eyebrow. She catches the look and plucks one out with 2 fingers. Try it. You hesitate. But when in ancient Persia, you chew, it's sharp, sweet, spicy, like an argument at a summer picnic. You cough. She laughs. Good for the blood, she says. Historians still argue whether rind preservation started out of necessity or luxury. Some believe it was a practical move. Why waste anything in the desert? Others claim it was medicinal, linked to early apothecaries who cataloged melon parts alongside opium and saffron. Still others argue that preserved rinds were status symbols, a kind of edible jewelry served to guests who mattered. In one particularly bizarre Ottoman manuscript, A royal physician details how the rind of a sung-to melon, if candied in snowmelt and rosewater, may soothe the hearts of concubines prone to nighttime terrors, which might be the most poetic way of describing antacid ever written. The woman begins to hum. It's low and arrhythmic at first, but then it settles into a pattern that's vaguely familiar. You've heard this tune before, maybe from the boy, or from the pit, or maybe you've just imagined it. The way you imagine echoes that fit your footsteps a little too well. She plucks a seed from the roasted melon and places it gently in your palm. You plant that one in your sleep. You nod, pretending you understand. Tell it your name. She adds, you hesitate. Then, whisper your name to the seed. The fire crackles in approval. There's a theory tucked away in the weirder end of Persian dream literature that names, when spoken to seeds before burial, imprint intention, not fate. Exactly, but tone. A seed named in anger may grow bitter. A seed named in love, sweet. A seed named in sleep. Well, that one dreams with you. The sun's now high. The sky above is bleached white. The hut throws no shadow, but the inside of your chest feels cooled. Somehow, like something soft and brave is being preserved under your ribs. You thank the woman. She only nods and goes back to stirring her jam of questionable ingredients. You start walking again. Roasted melon breath. Sweet on your seat on your tongue, and tucked safely in your pocket. A single seed dreams your name. You follow the wind now, not because it knows where it's going, but because you don't, and frankly, the wind seems more confident than you. The desert flattens out, soft as a held breath. The sun has reached that point where it no longer burns but hovers, patient, like it's watching to see what you'll do next. Then you hear it. A voice, low, steady, just at the edge of hearing, like the sound of water on tile, or a whisper through a wall. You follow it, over a dune, around a crumbling stone well, through a thicket of bone-dry brush that rustles like parchment, and then there, she stands alone in a hollow between dunes, her robe caught in the wind like a ship's sail. She's singing. No, not singing, chanting. The words are soft, curling. You don't recognize the language, but the rhythm is unmistakable. It's the same pattern the boy hummed, the same one the melon roaster breathed between recipes. It's older than sense, older than you, maybe older than sound. At her feet is a half-dug pit. Inside, wrapped in cloth and cradled with straw, lies another watermelon. Its rind is pale and pocked, but whole. She kneels beside it, singing directly into the hollow. Does it help? You ask, voice just above the breeze. She looks up slowly, smiles like she already knew you'd ask that. It remembers the season better this way. She says, you crouch beside her. The pit radiates coolness, a thermal sigh from beneath the surface. She dips her fingers into a clay bowl filled with what looks like flower oil and anoints the rind in small circles, never stopping the chant. It's almost like a lullaby. You say? She nods. It is. Mainstream historians often dismiss oral traditions as decorative, something layered onto the real work of preservation. But here, it's the opposite. The song isn't the garnish, it's the sealant. Each note binds the sweetness inside, she explains, and binds the time. 2. You blink. The time. She leans in close, her voice quieter than wind on stone. Melons don't rot. They remember, but only if they're sung to. The logic is hazy, but it feels true in your bones. It's like how old people say bread rises better when you're in a good mood, or how cats know which chair is haunted. Historians still argue whether these chants began as agricultural instructions, religious prayers, or idle lullabies. But in one Persian travelogue from the 11th century, a merchant noted that his host sang to a melon as one would to a restless child, coaxing its soul to stay intact beneath the rind. You find yourself swaying slightly. The chant is hypnotic. Just a few notes, over and over, no high points, no climax, just gentle insistence. You imagine singing this for hours while wrapping linen, or while waiting for winter, or while saying goodbye. Do they all know it? You ask. The villagers. She shrugs. Not everyone sings, but the good ones do. And then she adds, like it's a minor detail. Melons stored without song don't last past the new moon. You glance at the fruit nestled below. It's starting to look less like produce and more like a guest being tucked in. There's a breeze now. It slides into the pit and turns the chant into an echo, low and twinned. You shiver, not from cold, but from the sense that something invisible is watching. Or maybe listening. A string of flat stones nearby bears faint carvings, glyphs, shaped like water droplets and crescent moons. You point at them. Those part of the ritual. She nods. Names. Of the melon. Of the person who picked it. And of the last rain. You're silent for a long moment. How do you know when to dig it up? When the chant stops, she says simply, you don't ask what she means. You're not sure you want to know. She begins burying the melon again, slowly, covering it with sand laced with lavender ash. Each handful is gentle, almost reverent. Her chant doesn't stop, even as her arms tire, even as sweat beads on her forehead. Finally, the last layer goes down. She smooths it like a blanket. Then silence. You both sit, listening, waiting, for nothing, for everything. There's a fringe theory in desert anthropology mostly shared in wine-stained notebooks and message boards. Nobody admits reading that singing to fruit might affect its cellular vibration. That a sung-to melon retains a more stable water structure, resisting rot through frequency alignment. That's probably nonsense. But you're sitting here, in a hole, with a stranger, after singing to a watermelon like it's a sleeping god, so maybe nonsense is just wisdom in a funnier hat. She wipes her hands on her robe and stands. Now we forget about it. She says, just like that. She grins. If you remember too hard, it doesn't stay sweet. You walk with her back toward the ridge. The sun begins to fall, not so much setting as sighing. Your shadow stretches longer than your doubts. Behind you, in that quiet pit, one watermelon sleeps. Named, sung to, sealed, forgotten, but not unloved. You don't look back. Not yet. The next morning begins with smoke and arguing. You wake to the sound of metal clanging against stone and two voices throwing syllables like they're trying to outseason a stew. It's not angry. Exactly. More competitive. You crawl out from the shade of a sun-bleached acacia tree and squint into the brightness. You're in someone's courtyard. Again, somehow, desert logic. This time, it's tiled, mismatched ceramic squares laid down like a mosaic designed by someone with commitment issues. There are dates drying on woven mats, a sleepy cat twitching in a clay bowl, and in the center, two chefs, one short and round with a beard like a dust storm, the other tall and wiry with a spice pouch that jingles when he moves. Between them, on a table polished with age and apricot stains, sits a halved watermelon. Its insides are as red as a secret. Its seeds arranged into a tidy spiral, like a bribe for a very picky god. The short one points at a bowl of saffron threads. You add it after chilling. The tall one scoffs. You bury it with the saffron. It breathes it in. You raise a hand halfway. Hello, what's going on? The short one answers first. We're saving a melon. The tall one snorts. We're perfecting a legacy. You're not sure which is worse? You settle in to watch, because apparently you're now a judge in the court of ancient fruit technique, and also because one of them hands you a date soaked in rose water. You eat it. It's soft and confusing. They begin preparing two melons, twin halves, treated very differently. One is rubbed with salt and honey before being wrapped in oiled parchment. The other is stuffed with mint, cardamom pods, and strands of saffron before being sealed in waxed cloth. They move with the fluid choreography of people who have done this for too many summers and have too much pride to stop. You know, the short one mutters, the melon was once sacred to the Zoroastrians. The tall one sniffs. Everything was sacred to the Zoroastrians. Mainstream history agrees that melons held symbolic value in pre-Islamic Persia, often associated with fertility, coolness, and divine sweetness, attributes prized in a land where rivers are seasonal rumors. Ancient Zoroastrian texts don't mention melons directly, but there are references to fruit bearing the water of memory, which definitely sounds like a watermelon wearing a disguise. Back then, the short one continues. They'd store melons under fire altars, sealed in goat fat and surrounded by incense ash. It was an offering and an emergency snack. The tall one raises an eyebrow. And how many melons caught fire that way? Historians still argue about that. You're handed a spoon. The chilled melon, saffron-free, is cut and offered. You taste cool, clean, like sugar filtered through a glacier. Then the other half still warm from the wax seal, rich, floral, spicy, like eating perfume at a spa for ghosts. They wait. Well, the tall one asks, which lasts longer? You blink. That's not how taste works. but apparently it is. The melon's flavor, they explain, reveals how well it will store. A too sweet melon rots early. A bland one never ripens fully underground. Only a melon with a balanced memory survives the desert months. You have no idea what that means. But you nod like you do. A tiny old woman appears with a clay flute and plays a few breathy notes near each melon. The chefs nod in approval. Apparently, even the melon's sound matters. You hear that? The short one whispers. The rind hums lower on the right. That's the good one. There's a theory found in the marginalia of an 18th century manuscript on orchard spirits that melons store echoes, not just sound, but intention. That every hand that touches it leaves a vibration, and those vibrations dictate how long the fruit stays good. You're starting to believe it. Either that, or the date you ate was laced with something educational. Eventually, the melons are sealed and labeled, not with writing fades. Instead, each is marked with a symbol, a ring for the saffron, a spiral for the salt. The symbols are pressed into beeswax and tied with hair-thin reeds. The chefs place the melons into separate clay urns, lined with sand, and carry them to the edge of the property. There, they lift a slab of stone, revealing a narrow shaft that breathes cool air like a tired whisper. One at a time, the melons are lowered down. You peer in after them. The shaft goes on longer than you'd expect, curving into the earth like a spiral staircase of breath. Somewhere down there, next to jars of dates and loaves of buried bread, the melons will dream their quiet, spicy dreams. The chefs dust off their hands and declare a truce, at least until the equinox, when they'll dig them up and taste for truth. As you leave the courtyard, the tall one calls after you. Don't trust any preservation method that doesn't have a song or a spice. You wave. Noted. And as you turn toward the next patch of dune and dust, you can't help but smile, because somewhere, under layers of cloth and sand, two very different watermelons are now being tested. One chilled, one spiced, both preserved by pride, ritual, and the whispered certainty that flavor remembers everything. You find the spice road not on purpose but by scent. First comes cinnamon, curling through the dry air like a lazy ribbon. Then something sharper, coriander maybe, or crushed cumin. By the time your feet reach the stones, you're practically sniffing your way forward like a desert bloodhound with a gourmet palate. The road isn't much, just a string of flat stones sunken into the sand, half covered by centuries of footsteps and indecision, but it hums with memory. You can feel it in your ankles. And there, squatting by a burlap-covered cart, is a merchant who looks like he's been sitting there since the Sassanid dynasty and has no intention of getting up anytime soon. His beard could shelter small mammals. His robes are patched with 7 different centuries. And beside him, wrapped in faded green cloth and balanced like an offering, is a watermelon. It's smaller than the others, rounder. You're pretty sure you've seen cannonballs with less attitude. Careful, he rasps, as you reach toward it. That one's older than your regrets. You pause. How old? He shrugs. Harvested. The summer the river turned backwards. Helpful. He begins unwrapping the melon with the care of someone disarming a relic. Layer by layer, he peels back goat wool, then silk, then wax paper, each layer drier and dustier than the last. Finally, he reveals the rind, intact, pale, with faint lines carved across it like the rings of a sleeping planet. He lifts it, kisses it, and sets it gently on a carved cedar board. Then he takes out a curved blade that looks like it once had opinions about empires. You sit, because apparently this is happening whether you're ready or not. You preserved that through a whole desert crossing. You ask. He nods. From Yazd to Damascus. That's impossible. Is it? He grins. Or is the desert just a very big refrigerator that wants to kill you? You're starting to suspect that in this world, every question has 3 answers. The practical one, the poetic one, and the one sung by someone you'll never meet. He slices the melon open. There's no spurt, no drama, just a soft sound, like the sigh of old paper. The flesh inside is firm, almost amber. You lean closer. It smells like sunlight remembered through honey. He offers you a slice on a shard of pottery. You taste. It's chewy, sweet, strange. Like watermelon filtered through sandalwood and memory. Like it was once fruit. but chose to become incense instead. Mainstream historians acknowledge that melons were transported long distances across ancient trade routes, but they rarely dive into the nitty-gritty of how. The idea of preserving a melon through months of desert travel seems absurd until you meet someone who did it. The merchant explains. First, choose the right melon dense, unblemished, with a stem that curls toward the rind. Roast lightly. Wrap in silk rubbed with alum and camphor. Bury in dry tea leaves if you can afford them. Otherwise, find sand scented with mint ash. And most importantly, he says, holding up a finger, sing to it every night. You groan. Not this again, not a lullaby. He corrects. A map. A map. The song tells it where to go. Through heat, through night, through silence. If you stop singing, it forgets the way. You're not sure if this is ancient logistics or mystical nonsense. Probably both. But the idea of a fruit carrying its own musical itinerary across the desert is charming and ridiculous, and exactly the kind of thing that makes you believe just a little too easily after 2 days in the sun. He gestures to the rind, where faint etchings glimmer in the light. Ballad lines, he says, one verse for each night of travel. You run your fingers across the surface. It's not writing. Not really. More like notches in a prayer wheel. But you can imagine it. A caravan of tired bodies humming to bundles of preserved sweetness. A lullaby for survival. There's a fringe paper written by a Tunisian ethnomusicologist who believes that trade routes functioned as melodic highways paths mapped not just by stars and wells, but by the songs traders sang at specific points. Some notes warned of thieves, others marked safe camps. Some were, allegedly, for the fruit. Historians still argue whether this theory holds any watermelons. As the sun leans westward, the merchant wraps the melon's remains in fresh cloth and ties it with thread the color of old copper. Still good for another week. He mutters, you stare. How do you know? He taps his chest. Because I remember how it felt the day I wrapped it. You sit in silence for a moment, watching the dust settle, listening to the wind trying to hum along. Then he offers you a smaller melon, wrapped and humming faintly in his lap. Here, he says, carry this one. Where to? He shrugs. Wherever you're still sweet. You don't know what that means, but you take it anyway. You wrap it against your chest like a story. And as you walk away from the spice road, the breeze at your back, you think you can hear the faintest hum from the rind. Maybe it's a map. Maybe it's just the wind pretending to remember something. Either way, you hum back. You follow the merchant's instructions, or at least the general direction he pointed in, which might have been west or might have been toward your unresolved feelings. Hard to say. Either way, you're now trekking across a patch of dunes that resemble upside-down bowls, each one daring you to trip. The melon is cradled in your arms, warm from your chest but cool beneath its wrappings. It makes no sound, but you're still humming, quietly, just in case. Up ahead, you spot a strange structure, a circular wall made of stacked bricks, half sunk into the earth like a forgotten crown. You duck through an opening. It's cooler inside, shaded and dry. In the center, there's a pit lined with charred stones and lined shelves. And, to your astonishment, more melons. At least 6, maybe 7, each wrapped in different materials: leather, cloth, reed matting, and marked with symbols burned into wood tags. A young man sits beside a flat stone slab, scratching something into a tablet with a bone stylus. He looks up, startled. You're early, he says. You blink. Am I? He shrugs. Doesn't matter. There's always something to preserve. You sit, unwrap your melon slowly. He watches with interest, then nods with professional approval. Fire-baked. Just lightly. You say, trying to sound like you know what you're doing. He takes the melon, taps the rind 3 times, holds it to his ear. Still awake, you pause. I thought the goal was to put them to sleep. He smiles. No, the goal is to let them dream. Different. He gestures to the wall of wrapped fruit. Each one in here is dreaming. The fire ones dream loud. The salted ones dream long. The sung ones. He taps his temple. They dream true. You raise an eyebrow. What does that even mean? He doesn't answer, just beckons you closer to the stone slab. Carved into it is a grid, each square labeled with unfamiliar glyphs, some spirals, some sharp lines like little spears. A melon map. He explains, this is the ledger of sleep. Every melon placed here has a record how it was treated, what it was wrapped in, and, most importantly, what it was sung. You scan the glyphs, so the songs are cataloged too. He nods. Not the lyrics, those change. The tone, the intention. He hands you a tiny clay dish filled with what looks like gray sand. Camel dung ash, he says, as if it's not the worst phrase ever uttered. You nearly drop it. But he explains, this fine ash is used to line the storage pits. It draws moisture away from the melon, purifies bacteria, and keeps temperature stable. The smell, surprisingly mild. The function, shockingly advanced. Fringe preservationists call it desert refrigeration. Historians still argue whether this technique originated in Persia, Mongolia, or somewhere simultaneously desperate and inventive. All agree on one thing. Nothing dries like camel dung, not even bureaucratic ambition. You watch as he scoops the ash, spreads it evenly into the pit, and lowers your melon in with the reverence of a priest burying a holy relic. Then comes the wool, a soft, pale fleece wrapped 3 times clockwise, once counterclockwise, to confuse the spirits. He says, not even blinking. You ask, is that a real belief? He tilts his head, only if you believe in spirits, or melons that hold grudges. You laugh, then stop, because honestly you're not sure anymore. He adds rose petals to the top of the wrapping, then seals the pit with a clay disc. He marks it with your name, roughly spelled in scratched script, followed by a single dot. 1 dot means first-time preserver. He says, do I get a badge? He grins. You'll know you've leveled up when the melon talks back. You sit beside him as he starts humming again, soft, rhythmic, like someone whispering while sewing. The chant is unfamiliar, but the cadence isn't. It matches the one from the woman at the pit, the one from the boy, the one from the merchant. They're all different melodies, but the beat, the core remains the same. You hum along. There's something about the way the stone enclosure holds the sound. It vibrates, barely, like the pit is singing back. He pulls out a small leather-bound book, half journal, half recipe collection, and opens to a page stained with age and what might be melon juice. In careful script, it reads, melon storage, variant 17 fire-wrapped, ash-cured, wool-dreamed. You point to the margins, where a drawing shows a clay figure sleeping beside a melon. What's that? That, he says, is the sleeper. You wait. He finally adds, some say melons preserve better when they're not alone. So, sometimes, a figurine is placed with it, made of dust and hair, a watcher. You shiver, and not from cold. You imagine lifting the clay lid 6 months from now and finding not just a whole melon, but something beside it, something small, human-shaped, cradling the rind with arms that weren't molded by your hand. You ask, do you actually believe that? He doesn't answer, just slides the book closed. The wind shifts outside, bringing in the faint smell of dried figs and forgotten water. The sun slices across the dome above, painting a moving circle of light on the stone floor. You both fall quiet. Somewhere beneath your feet, a melon is dreaming, wrapped in ash, cloaked in wool, whispered into stillness. And maybe, just maybe, it's not dreaming alone. You leave the melon cellar at dusk, trailing that same chant under your breath, the rhythm clinging like sand to the soles of your thoughts. The sky has turned violet at the edges, and somewhere in the distance, you hear drums. Not loud ones, soft, hollow things. As if someone is tapping on the lid of a clay jar from the inside, you follow the sound. Down a slope, over cracked flagstones, past 2 goats arguing with a fence post. The sun dips lower, the drums grow clearer, and soon you reach the edge of a small circle of tents, each one striped in different colors, each one straining slightly against the wind as if whispering secrets to each other. In the center, a fire, and around it, seated cross-legged in silence, are 5 or 6 figures, most with their eyes closed. One of them, a man with a silver coin sewn into his forehead, cradles a small watermelon in his lap like a baby. He's humming, but the melody isn't soft. Not this time. It's strange, uneven, full of pauses that almost sound like mistakes. Then you realize the song doesn't end. There's no repeating pattern. It just flows, like breath on a mirror, like a dream you keep re-entering. You sit, unnoticed or unbothered, and watch. When he finally opens his eyes, he looks at you directly. You know this one. You shake your head. It's the song with no ending, he says, stroking the rind. Taught to me by my grandmother's mother, passed down like a spoon no one dares throw away. You ask, why does it have no ending? He smiles, because when you stop singing it, the melon starts to rot. There it is again. The belief that these fruits, these ridiculously perishable, oddly worshipped spheres of sugar and water, need more than just salt and shade. They need attention. They need music. Mainstream scholars rarely touch this topic, perhaps because it sounds absurd. The idea that a fruit's lifespan could be affected by melody, but in scattered oral archives, there are references to unbroken songs. Preservation chants carried across generations, taught not in notes, but in breath, pitched slightly different for each melon, depending on the harvest moon, soil flavor, and even the picker's mood. Fringe theories abound. One old Armenian manuscript claims melons, if sung to correctly, store not only sweetness, but hours, whatever that means. You ask the man if he believes in it. I don't believe it, he says. I remember it. He leans forward and presses your hand against the rind. Feel that. You do. A faint vibration, maybe from his humming, maybe from the fire, maybe from the fact that your own pulse has synced to the rhythm without permission. The watermelon is warm, alive, almost. You think of the phrase, still dreaming, and then you wonder what happens when you stop the dream. You never let this song finish. You ask, he shakes his head. You sing until you store it. Then someone else picks it up and continues, even underground. It remembers, and when you dig it up, you sing again. If you forget the tune, the fruit dies in its sleep. Another woman nearby starts humming. A different part of the melody, it overlaps with his, then a third joins. Their voices weave around each other, strange and wordless, like braided air. You sit back, the fire licking the sky now, shadows thrown like soft arms over everyone's shoulders. They pass around slivers of preserved melon rind, tough, tart, wrapped in clove and fig sap. It crackles as you chew, each bite tasting like a memory someone else had for you. Then the man produces a small, wrapped bundle from his satchel. This, he says, is the original singer. He unwraps it gently. It's not a fruit, it's a scroll. Unfurling slowly, it reveals a winding line of dots and slashes, not words, but notation, not music. Exactly. More like instructions. Where to breathe, where to pause, where to think of rain. He doesn't explain it further. He doesn't need to. You're beginning to understand that here, melody is currency, not for buying, for keeping, for preserving not just food, but emotion, memory, fragile things that spoil in silence. Historians still argue whether scrolls like this were real or retroactive myth. Some believe they were mnemonic tools used by merchants or preservationists to guide their chants. Others suggest they were purely symbolic, a form of magical thinking applied to agriculture. You ask if you can sing it. He hands you a new scroll, blank. Write your own first, then you can join ours. You nod. You don't know the melody yet, but your hands are already twitching with a rhythm. As the fire dies down, someone opens a clay jar and pulls out a melon wrapped in 6 cloths, each marked with a different symbol. One by one, they peel the layers back, singing to each as they do. And when the final cloth comes off, the fruit gleams, unblemished, slightly shriveled, but proud, still dreaming. You stay until morning, half asleep, half awake, humming fragments of a tune you can't name, and somewhere beneath the sand, scattered in jars and pits and bundles, melons wrapped in chants. Continue sleeping, safe, preserved, not by salt or shade, but by song. You wake before the sun. The sky is smeared with indigo and a little leftover starlight, and the air smells faintly of last night's ash, fig peels, and warm rind. The tent camp is silent now, folded into itself like a sleeping animal. You stretch your back, wipe sand from your eyelids, and start walking. You don't know where you're going. That's become something of a tradition by now. The dunes roll out before you like a slow song with no chorus. And then, from somewhere in the distance, a sound breaks through, a sharp laugh, quickly hushed, then soft footsteps, then a whisper, "Go," before they see you. You follow the noise, slipping through a narrow canyon where the cliffs are sunburned red, and the rocks look like old regrets that never eroded properly. At the end of the canyon, just beyond a cracked olive tree, you spot them. Three teenagers crouched around a pit. The sand has been dug up in frantic scoops, revealing a half-exposed clay jar. One boy is holding a knife. The girl beside him is clutching a cloth bundle like it might explode. The third, barefoot and grinning, is eating a wedge of watermelon with the reckless joy of someone who didn't pay for it. You step on a rock, it crunches. They freeze. You raise both hands, just watching. The boy with the knife narrows his eyes. You gonna tell? You shake your head. That depends. What exactly am I not telling? He hesitates, then smirks. We borrowed a melon. Borrowed. From the priest cellar. Ah. The girl tosses you a slice. Fast and sticky. Try it. Still good. Must have been in there since spring. You bite. It's cold. Ridiculously so. Sweet, but not too much. Like a story that left out the sad part. They watch your face closely, gauging your expression. You nod. Not bad for contraband. They laugh. Half from relief. Half from being 17 and convinced they've outwitted the cosmos. Then the barefoot one clears his throat. We did it right. Though, we sang, "Oh, you ass. All of you, not the whole thing." The girl admits, just enough to keep it from turning bitter. There's that phrase again. Mainstream historians never mention the phenomenon of bitter theft, the belief that a stolen melon turns sour unless certain rituals are followed. But in oral stories passed down through oasis towns and caravan outposts, the idea recurs. If you take a melon without permission, you must whisper to the moon, apologize, explain, maybe sing a fragment of its last lullaby. Otherwise, the boy says with a grin, the jinn get involved. Of course, melon theft, in these parts, isn't just petty crime. It's metaphysical roulette. The jinn, those mischievous, invisible desert spirits, are said to dwell in abandoned pits and forgotten urns. Wake them wrong, and your fruit ferments before sunset, or your teeth fall out. Or worse, your memory of the taste disappears, leaving only the craving behind. The girl adds, that happened to my uncle. He stole one from a marriage pit. You pause. A what pit? She points behind her, toward a collapsed stone wall. Used to be for engagement offerings. The couple would each preserve a melon in the same spot, dig it up together when they married. If it was still sweet, the match was blessed. And if it wasn't, she shrugs. Then they'd fight forever, or have twins with no eyebrows. Fringe marriage customs like this are rarely documented but often whispered. Some regions believed storing a melon together symbolized trust. You wrap your sweetness in shared hope. Bury it, and see if time agrees. Others used it as a compatibility test if one partner's melon spoiled first. They were deemed emotionally unstable, or just bad at wrapping. Anyway, the barefoot teen says, my uncle ate his bride's melon the night before the wedding. You gasp. The girl nods solemnly. They divorced during the reception. The sun is rising now, staining everything gold and improbable. You ask what they'll do with the rest of the stolen fruit. They hesitate. Then, sheepishly, the boy pulls out a knife again and starts slicing the rind into strips. We dry it, he says. Scratch messages into the skin. Hide them in jars. Why? Because texts disappear. But dried melon. He holds up a curling strip with initials etched along the edge. This'll still be here when we're bones. You help lay the slices on a flat stone, weighed with pebbles. The girl pulls out a pouch of cinnamon dust and sprinkles it across one. The boy adds a tiny charcoal dot to another. Each one is marked personal. Encoded. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays, furious about absolutely nothing. You sit with the melon thieves for a while, watching rind dry under the sun. The air smells like citrus and mischief. As you leave, the girl stops you. Hey, you turn. If you ever steal one, she says, whisper to it first. Just in case. Whisper what? She grins. Whatever you wouldn't want forgotten. You nod. And as you walk back toward the dunes, your pockets dusted with rind shavings and teenage rebellion, you wonder how many secrets lie folded in clay jars, how many stolen songs, how many quiet apologies whispered to a melon no one ever meant to love. The wind shifts as you climb the next rise, less dry now, more curious. Like it's sniffing your clothes for stories. You crest the dune, toes sinking, and find yourself staring at something you didn't expect to see in the desert. A school, or the ghost of one. It's nothing more than a half-crumpled clay building. Walls faded to a powdery pink. The roof's long gone. The door is a memory. But inside, you see actual rows of stone benches, each worn down by elbows and sun. Scratched into the walls are diagrams, Milan anatomy, irrigation symbols, musical notations, and curiously, half a poem about goat bladder fermentation. You step carefully inside. The floor is scattered with tiny shards of pottery and bits of old reed pen. In the far corner, a set of clay jars rest in a shallow pit. You kneel. One jar is open. Inside, rind, curled, dry, cracked with age, but unmistakable. Watermelon skin. On one strip, someone has scratched a name. Another reads, "Come back by moonlight." One more simply says, "I waited." You pull out a handful. Each one is etched. Tiny messages. Some are romantic, some sad, some unreadable. The script lost to time, or to the frantic handwriting of a heart in heat. You sit on the floor of this broken classroom, surrounded by ghost notes carved into fruit, and you realize this was a place of learning, but not just about farming or songs. This was a place where people learned how to remember. Mainstream historians often dismiss these desert schools as agricultural training camps. Simple facilities where locals were taught how to store food or treat soil. But fringe scholars insist that many were semi-monastic preservation institutes, not just for fruit, for feeling. It makes sense. If songs help fruit sleep, and names help seeds grow, then maybe, just maybe, rinds remember secrets. You don't need ink, just skin, and a stylus made of longing. You gently lift a particularly curled piece. It reads, "Don't let my brother know I kissed Dari." Classic. You pick up another. Buried two together. Mine and hers. If hers is still sweet, I'll try again. That one stops you. You imagine someone writing it at night, nervous, carving hope into a rind by moonlight, sealing it in a jar, burying it like a dare, waiting. You dig deeper. At the very bottom of the pit is a sealed jar. You hesitate, then pry it open. Inside, one rind strip, unmarked, untouched, still soft, preserved by time and wishful thinking. It doesn't smell rotten. It smells like rain on hot stone. Clean, undecided. There's a belief common in remote desert villages that if a message is too dangerous to write, you leave the rind blank. The fruit, they say, already knows what you meant. You just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. You put the blank strip in your pouch. There's a sudden gust outside. The doorless frame groans. A few pebbles scatter. The air now smells faintly of saffron and chalk. You stand, brushing sand from your knees, and walk the rows of benches like you're checking in on old students. On the far wall, someone once drew a preservation diagram, a series of concentric rings, seed, fruit, ice teased, cloth, jar, pit, chant, silence. But at the edge of the diagram, scribbled like an afterthought, is a final circle labeled return. You stare at it for a long time. Return to what? The jar, the taste, the person, or the feeling. You exit the school just as the sun hits its sleepy afternoon stride. The light is golden and slow. You walk with the blank rind in your hand, letting it catch the sun like glass somewhere in your chest. A tune tries to form. Just then, you see movement ahead, a lone woman walking towards you, carrying a basket covered with linen. You greet her. She lifts the cloth. Inside, a dozen small rind scrolls, tied with thread. She holds one out to you. Take it. You unfold the strip. It reads, "He lied about the salt." You raise an eyebrow. "We run a delivery exchange." She says, "Messages carved into rind, preserved, shared only under the right moon." You laugh. "How do you know which moon is right?" She shrugs. "The melons tell us." She hands you a blank rind and a needle carved from bone. You've got something to say, don't you? You hesitate. Then you start scratching. You don't know exactly what the message is yet, but your hand moves, and the rind softens just enough under your grip, like it's listening. You tie the scroll. She tucks it gently into her basket. "When will it be read?" you ask. She smiles. "When someone needs to taste it." And then she's gone, her shape vanishing behind a slow wave of sand, her basket of edible confessions rattling like a lullaby made of guilt. You stand still, rind dust on your fingertips. Words now floating somewhere between your chest and someone else's lips. Messages you'll never see read, but somehow already feel answered. The next village isn't marked on any map, which feels fitting. Nothing preserved ever is. You arrive just before sunset, the sky burning a sleepy orange. The wind quieter now, like even it's tucking in for the evening. The village is small, just a handful of domed houses clustered around a dry well and a crooked fig tree that's either dying or wise enough to pretend. There's a hum in the air, not wind, not insects. Voices. You follow the sound past a low wall and into a courtyard filled with women seated in a circle, each holding a melon in her lap. Some are wrapped in linen, others still dusty from the pit. A few are carved with tiny symbols, names, moons, maybe hearts. The women are singing, soft, steady, together. You don't know the words, but the cadence is familiar now. You could hum it in your sleep. Maybe you already have. An older woman with silver bangles stacked to her elbows nods at you. You're just in time. For what? You whisper. She pats the ground beside her. The judging. You sit. She hands you a melon. Warm, slightly misshapen, with a faint scent of mint. She nods once. Yours now. I didn't. You brought it in your bones. You decide not to argue with someone who wears time like perfume. One by one, the women begin placing their melons on a raised platform made of stone and stained stories. 3 more women stand behind it, judges, each one impossibly serene, the kind of calm that suggests they've stored things far heavier than fruit. The first melon is unwrapped slowly. A hush falls. The rind is clean, a small spiral carved near the stem. One judge lifts it, presses her ear to the side, and listens. You swear you hear something too? A faint vibration, like a string pulled taut across memory. She nods. The next judge cuts a thin slice, tastes, smiles faintly. The third judge says, balanced sweetness, stored under forgiveness, acceptable for vow recognition. A soft cheer. The woman who brought it exhales like she's just survived a year-long heartbeat. You lean toward the elder next to you. What is this? She smiles. Melon judging. For betrothals. Wait, like relationship tests. She nods. Every woman stores one. When she chooses a partner, or when he chooses her, they present their melon. If it's spoiled, the union waits. If it's sweet, they may proceed. You blink. That's high stakes. She shrugs. Marriage is, why not test sweetness while it's still honest? You watch as another melon is cut. This one smells odd, sharp. The judge frowns. Sour center. Stem energy was divided. Stored with regret, the woman who submitted it bows her head. Another nods in comfort. Try again next season. You ask, how do they know all that? Just from taste, not just taste. The song that grew it, the way it's wrapped, even the silence around it. There's a theory, whispered in only the most folklore-drenched corners of Persian anthropology, that melons carry emotional resonance not metaphorically, but literally. That water structured during growth retains vibrational memory. That bitterness isn't always a matter of sugar, but sorrow. Historians still argue whether any of this holds chemical weight. But here, they don't argue. They just listen to fruit. A young woman steps up now. Melon, in shaking hands. She unwraps it herself. You can see the nerves in her fingertips. The rind is pale but strong. No visible cracks. A tiny heart scratched near the base. The judges taste. Pause. Then one says, stored in hope. With patience, ripened by song. The woman cries, softly, just once. The man she's with, a lanky guy with a nervous jaw, steps forward and kisses her forehead. Someone claps. You don't realize you're holding your melon tighter until the elder nudges you. Yours? You hesitate. I didn't preserve it properly. You mumble. She shrugs. Neither did most of us. First time. But sweetness has strange loyalties. You walk slowly to the platform. Place the melon down. Unwrap it with clumsy hands. It's warm, dented on one side. You didn't sing to it properly. Or wrap it with oil. Or remember the moon phase. One judge listens to it. Another cuts a sliver. Tastes. Tilts her head. The third leans in. Then says, uneven sweetness. Dreamed alone. But deeply. You wait for more. For judgment. For rejection. But instead, the first judge says, someone loved this, even if they couldn't say it. You feel it in your throat before your eyes. That sting, that old song of being seen by something that isn't trying to fix you. The judges nod. Acceptable. One says, rare, but true. You carry the melon back to your spot. Not untouched, not perfect, but understood. The elder beside you hums. Next time, wrap it in your name. You nod, not trusting your voice. And as the moon rises over the melon court, casting silver light on rind and ring and ritual, you realize something. These aren't just love tests. They're memory audits, echo chambers, containers of sweetness stored in case someone ever doubts that it existed. And tonight, you tasted proof. You leave the melon judging just after midnight, your thoughts padded with wool and sugar. The air outside is cooler now, edged with sage smoke and something sharper, something metallic. The village has gone quiet, except for the hush of cloth doors shifting in the wind, and a low whistle from a kettle left forgotten. You head toward the edge of the town. You don't know why, only that something is calling you. Not a voice exactly, more like a breath between thoughts. Then you see it. A cellar, low and round, half submerged in sand, almost like a buried yurt. Its entrance is marked with a painted symbol, two interlocking spirals, one red, one black. Below it, a phrase scrawled in fading dye. Do not enter unless you're ready to forget. You stare at the door. Well, that's not an invitation. You push it open. The wood creaks like it hasn't moved since the last empire collapsed. Inside, darkness, cold, and a smell so dense, so ripe, so unholy. It makes your teeth ache. You gag, just a little. Then something moves, not loudly, just the faint rustle of cloth, the brush of sand on stone. You light a stub of candle from your pouch, don't ask how it got there. By now, your pockets are just narrative devices and the flame sputters to life, casting a weak circle of amber light. And there, in the center of the cellar, sits it, a melon. But not just any melon. This one is wrong, misshapen, swollen, covered in layers of waxy cloth that glisten like wet parchment. Around it, a ring of broken clay shards, each etched with different names. A few familiar, most not. There's a space in the circle, just large enough for one more shard. You do not step into it. A woman's voice breaks the silence. You shouldn't be here. You spin. She's in the corner, half-shadowed, eyes wide, sleepless, dressed in mourning clothes. No one wears mourning clothes anymore. I didn't know you start. No one does, she says. You gesture to the melon. What is that? Her voice flattens. A mistake. She walks slowly to it, kneels without touching it. They tried to preserve a lie, wrapped it in praise, sang it too long, buried it with names that didn't belong to it. You don't speak. She finally looks at you. Now it remembers everything, even what we didn't say. Mainstream scholars avoid stories like these partly because they're impossible to prove, partly because they're unnerving. But desert folklore is filled with whispers of cursed cellars, of melons buried improperly, oversung, overloved, overfeared, gaining a kind of sentience, or at least memory dense enough to be mistaken for it. Some call them gam melons. Melons of sorrow. Some call them something worse. The woman continues. It was meant to hold one season's sweetness. Just one? But the singing didn't stop. The storage layers changed hands. It was passed from lover to lover, from liar to liar, until the fruit inside turned black and the rind cracked like old secrets. She lights a bowl of incense and circles the melon 3 times. You ask, why not destroy it? She freezes. You don't destroy a memory, she says. You just stop feeding it. You feel that in your stomach. The way a truth lands without asking permission. She turns back to the melon, begins unwrapping one layer of cloth. The smell intensifies, earthy, burnt sugar, with a hint of rust and something floral, like grief dressed in perfume. I check it once a year, she explains, to make sure it's still sealed. You swallow. What happens if it's not? She looks at you. You wish she hadn't. There's a reason we sing to melons, she says. It isn't to preserve them. It's to keep them quiet. You step back. The candle flickers. She begins humming low, slow, dissonant. The tune doesn't comfort. It presses, like a thumb on your thoughts. She nods at the door. Go, before it starts listening to you. You don't argue. Outside, the night feels warmer, cleaner. You walk fast. Don't look back. But later, much later, you reach into your pouch, and your fingers brush something you didn't put there. a shard of clay, etched with your name. You hold it under the moonlight. The ink is fresh, the edges warm. You stare at it for a long time, and then you bury it right there, in the sand, without a chant, without a witness, just silence. Historians still argue whether these stories of cursed preservation pits are metaphors for trauma or actual accounts distorted by time and fear, but the lesson remains the same. If you store something long enough, sing to it, feed it, protect it. It stops being fruit. It becomes a truth that outlives its purpose. And not all truths want to be remembered. You walk for hours the next day, not really to get somewhere, just to get away. The desert has its own version of forgiveness. It doesn't care who you are or what you've seen, as long as you keep moving. So you do, past the skeleton of an aqueduct, past goat bones arranged like someone once tried to build a calendar out of livestock, past wind-worn altars to gods no one remembers and prayers nobody dares translate. Eventually, you hear singing again, but this time, it's joyful. You crest a hill and find a group of travelers huddled under a canopy of stitched sails and patchwork wool. Their clothes are sun-bleached, their sandals tied with hope. One of them strums an oud with a cracked soundboard. Another is painting thin lines of dye on the side of a gourd. And at their feet, nestled in burlap and faith, are sacks of seeds, melon seeds, thousands of them. You approach cautiously. Someone nods for you to sit. These are smugglers. Someone whispers near your ear, but the nice kind. You glance around. They don't look like criminals. They look like librarians who ran out of shelves and decided to store their books inside fruit. A woman leans forward. You've got the kind of face that's tasted preservation. You nod slowly. I've been storing a few things. She grins. Good. We're crossing the border tonight. Could use another voice. Another voice. She gestures to a burlap sack of seeds marked with an inked spiral and what might be a poem. These are illegal in 3 provinces, she says. Too sweet, too resistant to droughts, too full of memory. You blink. Memory. She pulls out a seed. It's black, glossy, smooth as polished bone. These came from a melon sung to by 5 generations of women. Same family, same tune. Grown in the same soil every year, buried in the same pit. And that makes the seed stubborn, she says, like all good things. Mainstream agriculture denies the idea that song can alter the genetic material of seeds, but fringe researchers have long speculated that vibrational frequencies during fruit growth might affect protein folding, leading to slightly altered traits. Most call it fantasy. These smugglers call it inheritance. One man, hunched over a map drawn on lambskins, points at a winding route between 2 old rivers. We'll pass through the Valley of Ash first, he says. That's where they burned the singing pit. Then into the Pass of Forgotten Songs. You raise a hand. Are those actual places? He shrugs. To us, yes. A girl maybe 12 years old threads a needle through a small square of melon rind, stitching it into a pouch like a patch. On it, someone's carved the words, "Do not forget the bitter ones." You're handed a jar. Inside are seeds, each wrapped in a strip of cloth soaked in rose water and salt. They smell alive. You're responsible for this one. Someone says, "What does it grow?" They look at each other, then answer, "We don't know anymore." But something sweet. The sky begins to fade toward indigo. The pack is gathered. Some mount camels, some strap jars to their backs. One old man ties his seed pouch directly to his chest, right over his heart. And then the humming starts. You recognize the rhythm. Of course you do, but this time it's different. It moves. It's a traveling song. Each step has a note, each footfall a breath. They don't just sing to the seeds. They sing the route into the ground. The border guards don't understand. Someone tells you, but the sand listens. If the rhythm's right, the desert lets you through. You march beside them through dusk, through wind, through invisible lines scratched by men who never tasted what they banned. There's an old myth from northern Persia told by shepherds who were better poets than mapmakers that seeds can carry loyalty. That a well-preserved fruit passes not just flavor, but allegiance. That smugglers aren't moving contraband. They're moving promises. Historians still argue whether seed smuggling ever existed on this scale. Most official records call it folk hysteria. But here, you carry a jar against your chest like a relic. And you sing. Like you You've always known the tune. Eventually, you reach a checkpoint. Just a rock, really, marked with soot. Quiet. Someone whispers, "The guards don't like melody." You all go silent. Even the wind seems to hush. You pass in pairs, eyes lowered, steps slow. The earth creaks beneath you. The moment you're clear, someone breaks into laughter. A high, cracked laugh full of heat and relief. We made it. The group gathers again under the stars. No fire this time, just breath. Just dust, just seeds curled into pouches, waiting for the next patch of soil. You sit down, unwrap your jar, peer inside. The seed is still there, still humming. You can't hear it with your ears, but you feel it. In your teeth, in your spine, in the space behind your ribs that was once heavy, but now feels a little looser. You sleep beside smugglers that night, seed thieves, memory carriers, border ballad singers. And just before you drift off, someone murmurs into the dark, "Sing loud when you plant it. It deserves to know it made it home." Morning comes slow, not like a sunrise, but like a thought forming tentative, unpolished, quiet. You wake to the gentle rustle of cloth, the thump of jars being packed, and the final low notes of a song someone forgot to finish. The smugglers are already moving. Carefully, silently. Melons don't like goodbyes. Apparently, you're handed flatbread wrapped around pickled rind and mint. You eat it with a kind of reverence you never thought melon skin would command. There's a tang to it, sharp, nostalgic, like the flavor is remembering for you. As the group splits off, some toward a mountain passes, others toward river caravans. You're told to head east. There's a village there. Someone says, 2 of them. Actually, they've been competing for centuries, and it's preservation season. Competing how? You ask. They grin. 1 melon, 1 winner. No mercy. You should have seen this coming. You reach the twin villages by dusk. They sit on opposite ridges, staring each other down like old lovers pretending not to care. Between them lies a shared field, littered with makeshift flags, shaded stalls, and a very official-looking podium made of bricks, goat bones, and half a wagon wheel. A banner flaps in the wind, painted in calligraphy. The Great Melon Preservation Duel, 781st edition. A man in a sash meets you at the edge. New judge. He asks, eyes you suspiciously. You nod without committing to anything. He shrugs. You're in. Before you can protest, you're led to the center of the field where 2 pits await, one on each side, covered with linen and sealed with wax. One by one, villagers gather. The crowd parts, and 2 figures step forward, champions. On the left, a stern-faced woman in her 70s, arms corded with labor, holding a melon wrapped in 8 layers of linen and sealed with embroidered thread. On the right, a teenage boy wearing far too many bracelets, and the expression of someone who's deeply confident but has never survived winter with a melon. They bow, and the duel begins. No swords, no shouting, just unwrapping. First layer. Both melons are revealed to be whole, rind intact. No soft spots. The crowd claps politely. Second layer. The judges, you among them, somehow test the temperature with the back of their hands. Hers is cool. His is slightly warm. Someone gasps. The teenage boy mutters something under his breath, probably a prayer or a remix. Then comes the crucial moment, the slice. You're handed a ceramic knife. 1 judge from each side nods. You step forward. You cut hers first clean, soft, with that faint hiss of air escaping a fruit that's waited too long to be known. The smell, cinnamon, lavender, salt, and underneath it all, melon. Real, loyal melon. You try not to smile. Then you slice slowly. The rind gives reluctantly. The flesh is darker than expected, fragrant, but there's something aggressive about the scent. You taste both. Her melon is sweet, deep, layered like a lullaby sung by someone who's buried too many things. His is electric. A burst of flavor, sharp and punchy, almost spicy. You turn to the panel. They taste. They murmur. One of them sneezes, which apparently is a good sign here. Then the deliberation begins. Loud, chaotic. Arguments flung like melon seeds at a family reunion. She preserved it during the dust month. He used dried mint oil. Dried mint. That's cheating. They both sang the wrong tune. Her rapping was crooked. He's 17 and arrogant. They're both delicious. You raise your hand. The crowd quiets. You say, "This isn't about which one tastes better." A pause. You continue. "It's about which one remembers more." Gasps. You hold up both slices. This one you gesture to the elders tastes like patience and fear and holding on even when you don't want to. You lift the teens. This one tastes like defiance, risk, trying to outsing death with a clove stick. More murmurs. And then you say the only thing that matters. They both win because they both dared to sing. For a moment, silence. Then laughter. Applause. Someone throws a rind slice into the air like confetti. The teenage boy fist pumps the air. The old woman smirks, then pats his cheek like she already forgives him for existing. And just like that, the duel ends. No official winner, no prize, just two melons. Still sweet, still dreaming, and a field full of people reminded that preservation isn't about perfection, it's about effort. There's a fringe belief among desert poets that the duel isn't really about melons at all, that it's a symbolic reenactment of the struggle between memory and forgetting, that the real contest isn't who stored better, it's who risked storing at all. You sleep under the podium that night, lulled by the scent of spices and crushed rind. Someone slips a note under your head, a thin strip of melon skin, etched with, "Don't forget next season, it's your turn to duel." You leave the villages just as the sun begins its slow descent, dragging long shadows behind every jar, tent, and pride-bruised teenager. The air feels different now, like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to end. You don't have a destination anymore. The path unfolds quietly beneath your feet, a mix of packed sand and faded footprints. You follow instinct more than direction, the same way you followed songs, smoke, and the scent of buried sweetness. By dusk, you find yourself in the middle of nowhere, which is exactly where it's supposed to be. A flat stretch of land, no markers, no structures, just a low, crescent-shaped mound in the sand. You almost walk past it until something tugs at your chest, a memory. A promise, a name whispered into rind. You kneel beside the mound. There's no marker, no carving, no charm, just silence. And then you feel it beneath the surface, a shape, round, softly resisting your palm. A melon. You don't know who buried it, or when, or why, but you know it's ready. You begin to dig, slowly, like you've been taught, hands moving without needing instruction. The sand parts gently, revealing a cloth-wrapped bundle. You brush away the final layer and lift it into your lap. It's warm, just barely, and you begin to hum, a tune you don't remember learning, but have always known, low, gentle, with pauses where breath becomes memory. You unwrap the melon. It's perfect, smaller than most, pale green with streaks of gold, the kind of fruit that looks like it knows secrets and will only share them if asked nicely. You press your ear to the rind. Silence. Then, faintly, a heartbeat. No, not quite. More like the echo of a voice that once sang, still vibrating beneath the skin. You hum again. The tone matches. The fruit responds. You swear the air shifts slightly. Warmer, closer. You raise your knife. Cut slowly. The rind gives with a soft sigh, and inside light, not literal, but emotional. The color of the flesh is unlike any you've seen before. Not pink, not red, but something between sunrise and forgiveness. You take a bite, and it tastes like return. Not home, not safety, but the return to something once lost, to sweetness after absence, to memory after silence. You sit there, dusk swallowing the edges of the sky, and finish the fruit. Every bite a lullaby, every mouthful a story you didn't know was yours. When it's done, you bury the rind beside the same pit. Then you reach into your pocket, pull out the blank strip from the desert school, the one you never etched, the one that's waited patiently. You finally carve a word into it. Not your name, not a date, just one word. Still, you place it gently in the sand, beside the rind, and you hum. Not a song to preserve, not a chant to ward off rot, just a note, sustained, for no one, for nothing. Except the moment, the desert listens, the wind stills, the stars blink awake, and somewhere everywhere beneath the surface of old pits and jars that were once hands, the melons keep dreaming. They've never stopped, and neither have you. The night stretches softly now, each minute lengthening like a slow breath. You're lying on your back, the sand cool beneath you, your arms heavy and full of stillness. The stars above look quieter somehow, like they've stepped back to let you sleep undisturbed. All around you, the world feels padded. Even the air has softened its sharp edges worn down by story, by fruit, by all the sweetness you never thought you'd still carry. You've walked a long way, trudged through memories wrapped in cloth, hummed lullabies to things most people forget the moment they leave the field. You've tasted joy that was buried, sorrow stitched into rind, love that fermented and came back stronger. You've sung maps into the dark and whispered names to seeds. And now, there's nothing left to preserve, only to rest. Let the melons sleep, let the jars cool, let the chant end. For tonight, at least. Maybe tomorrow you'll dig again, maybe not. But tonight, the wind hums in your place, and the stars, those patient archivists, keep watch over every song you forgot you were singing. Close your eyes. The sweet is still there, still dreaming, still waiting, still